Well, hey, my laptop says 2 p.m. UK time, so it's my great pleasure to welcome everybody to our latest webinar. And today we're looking at the recently released UK e-commerce report, where our research team takes a view on the dynamics of the UK's vibrant e-commerce market, despite the trials and tribulations thrown at us as a nation over the last 12 months. We've seen e-commerce has very much weathered a storm and really been there to support the UK through a very difficult time. So we are going to be chatting about that today. So it's my great pleasure to show you our lovely cover. Hopefully you will already have seen the report, but if not, you're very welcome to download it. It is free of charge, and it's a great opportunity to get a massive handful of stats. Big thanks, of course, to our lovely partners who've made the report possible. And we will have a couple with us today to go through some of the findings. But just to give you the quickest overview, especially for the young people out there with eagle-like eyes who can look at all of these thumbnails, fear not everyone else. If you're ocularly challenged, we are going to go through this in some detail. I'm not going to read everything out because, you know, you can read, time is short. So we're going to really focus on the key points and then discuss around them. And as I say, discuss, who better to have in the studio than long-standing and new friends to talk about it. So we have today Kieran and Lindsay. Lindsay, you know, I can't do a webinar without you anymore. So why don't you kick us off by just telling us who you are, a bit about you, and a little bit about Tealium, and then we'll hear from Kieran and a quick intro to ACI Worldwide. So Lindsay, say your hellos, please.
Hi everyone, my name's Lindsay McEwen. I'm the General Manager here at Tealium in Europe. We're an organisation that helps businesses exactly around that subject of e-commerce, but really figuring out who to talk to, how to talk to them, and making sure that the right information is in front of the right person at the right time. What a pleasure to be amongst some a very proportional middle-class white bearded men. So
Yes.
I look forward to a balanced conversation.
Although I must say that since we both have glasses and Kieran doesn't, then there is a level of, should we say, myopic balance here. Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Kieran. On that note, just tell everyone who you are and a little bit about ACI as well, please.
Thank you. My name's Kieran Mungie. I'm a payments optimization consultant within ACI. I also held roles within retailers at John Lewis and Vodafone in payments and fraud management. I spend my day working with the ACI solution technology, which is around payments optimization for e-commerce and omnichannel. So we are a technology company that is focused on the optimization of e-commerce and omnichannel across global.
When we say the optimization of e-commerce, what does that mean? Is that around payment, fraud, data about customers? What are you optimizing? Because that sounds so all-encompassing. I just want to give you all of my problems and have you solve them. Is there a focus, or do you do everything?
So, I mean, we need to look at payments strategically. And if you think about the money you spend as retailers in capturing customer, when they get to that checkout and we're moving to a more digitalized world, less face-to-face, especially with the COVID situation, where can you lose a customer in that journey? And how do you make that frictionless? So what is your strategy around authentication? And that's huge at the moment around some regulations from PSD2 around strong customer authentication. How do you store payment in app or store a customer's credentials so that you make payments frictionless? How do you then fraud screen the risk of that? And again, with more digital payments, contactless is another kind of emerging space where we're now, the UK government's offering £100 of contactless. So where is the authentication or validation of that?
Right.
So there's
we'll pick up on that bit in particular as we go through. So I think between you looking after my money and Lindsay looking after my data and everything to be known about me, then I think we're well placed to go through. So as we go through, gents, is the usual format: interrupt, argue, debate, throw things out. The slides are only here as an excuse. They're not to constrain us. And speaking of lack of constraint and no inhibition, please make sure you use that question box. So for those of you who are joining via a computer-mediated interface, do make sure that you check on my screen along the bottom. There's a very nice Q&A box there. So if you have a Q, we'll try and get an A. And anything we can't answer now, we will look at later, but I am monitoring all of those. So it'll be our pleasure to hear from you with any questions you might have. So don't be shy and don't let someone else ask the best questions first. Jump in there straight away. So that's it. We're going to take around 30 minutes. You'll have full access to this report afterwards. We'll send you a link for that. And also this recording as well, once we chop out the embarrassing bit about me starting it early. And one thing I would put in context is that this report sits nicely with the UK Top 500 report. So if you like, this is the background or the context in which those world-leading retailers practice their art and capabilities. So if you are trying to get a handle on the UK market, then I think these two reports side by side make all of the difference. So let's have a dive in. So when we look at the UK market, we have been accustomed here for, well, since the noughties to uninterrupted growth. A little bit of a hiccup last year, as you'd expect. And you can see that our GDP in pounds and euros took a bit of a hammering, and that's not really a surprise. Small thing called lockdown and pandemic that really put a brake on a lot of economic activity. However, in the midst of that, we saw that the UK retailers really did step up and covered off a lot of ground because people obviously still needed to eat. There was quite a lot of activity around our homes, leisure in these spots when we could get out from lockdown, and very much a case of some people thrived, but most survived. Now, one of the reasons for this is that the UK is just simply put a great place to do business. And it's not just me saying this, it is people like the Logistics Performance Index. And what we can see is that the UK ranks very highly, top 5, top 10, in all of the metrics for how to do business in terms of the logistics we have available to us, the e-government index. As we've seen recently, with vaccination information, with travel information, the fact that gov.uk is available, so up to date, so interactive, is a real tribute and something we don't see it is a leader worldwide. And also we have historic low levels of corruption, high levels of transparency, and the whole thing generally works. And this has allowed businesses and Her Britannic Majesty's citizens to interact with very limited friction and a lot of information. So it is these infrastructural capabilities that we may take for granted year in, year out, but whenever we're under stress, this is when we see the capabilities.
Sorry, I mean, we had some customers that I think had 4 times volume move from an in-store because of the lockdown to e-commerce, and without that logistics, that happened in the space of 2 or 3 weeks. It was quite an amazing achievement. But But that wasn't the only kind of aspect. You then had to control your payment experience and the cost of logistics. And actually, I think we've found a lot of those merchants have found a cheaper way of doing business, but still maintaining that customer. So it'd be interesting to see what happens next as we move out of lockdown, and who maintains that kind of service proposition or delivery, in store versus e-commerce. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and as you've given us our first opportunity to go off-piste, and I know that as people have moved online, we were doing some research on the grocery sector, and there you're looking at 8 times peak, non-stop for 6 weeks. This is what Tesco was telling us, and so these maybe 2 decades of investment in infrastructure, supply chain, logistics, allied to some good management, has allowed the sector to absorb these kind of brutal levels of traffic without buckling. And I think for those of us who've been in e-commerce for a long time, it used to be a surprise that the website could take a transaction, although we didn't tell our investors that. Then it was a surprise if it could take any level of volume. Whereas now, to be able to take this level is extraordinary. And I think maybe segueing over to Lindsay, one of the things that the pandemic has brought isn't just savvy e-commerce aware consumers spending more money. This has just washed up a vast number of late adopters, of the unwilling, of the unprepared, who, given the choice of doing it online or not doing it at all, have come along. We've seen online purchase frequency has increased across every single age group. There's no two ways about it. We are all just transacting online way, way more than ever before. And so this, of course, has given retailers a bit of a challenge, Lindsay, because it's not just their CRM, the same old people coming back. This is a whole slew of new faces.
Well, it's interesting, you see a lot of organizations talking about their digital transformation. And I find that quite a funny statement, because digital transformation is something that's happening, not something you do. And what impressed me the more was 2 things. Firstly, the agility of organizations and their ability to pivot. Literally, some organizations from 80% of an in-store interaction and experience with consumers to 0 overnight. And an amazing, modern technology allows agility inside organizations where people can really pivot so quickly in a direction towards a complete e-commerce environment. I think the second thing that we saw from the traffic and volume increases across our customers was how open a traditionally data-guarded country were with their sort of British stoic, I shall be anonymous, and you shall know who I am, but I don't really want to tell you who I am. You have to figure out who I am without me giving you too much data. That capitulation across, as you said, an entire age group, not just young, digitally savvy individuals who are, highly mobile. The experience is 2 mil apart. The shop is not 2 foot apart. It's a pane on an app apart, all the way up to, silver surfers who have thoroughly embraced this concept of organizations having an understanding of who you are digitally, and the comfort at which organizations like ACI and Kieran's business can provide a protected comfort feeling for people to transact online. I think it's phenomenal that touch payments has gone up to £100. I mean, if you'd have suggested that pre-pandemic, it would have been an uproar, because the world's going to steal my data just through proximity.
Yeah.
But the ease at which our country just pivoted towards a completely new way of interacting with businesses, I thought was impressive. And I think that comes from the fact that 80% of our GDP is service-based. We are a consumer of experiences as a nation, and I think we just refocused our attention, and I was amazed at both the population and businesses' reaction to such a catastrophic and cataclysmic event.
I think in some ways we were ready for it. We just needed that little push or the opportunity, and because it's not that hard. One of the things just to mention.
Just to add one other thing. I mean, we're quite digitally savvy in the merchant world and retailing, but the banks and the card issuers have to really step up in terms of the APIs and the messages they receive to these digital payments, and offer their customers a way of authenticating, or else fraud and other issues could really stifle the move. It will continue ahead, but it may cost us in fraud and other areas. So the banks have to be very much on board with that customer experience and journey.
Yes, and again, one of the areas that really is under change now is the whole banking system with open banking. So that'll be interesting to look at. Lindsay.
What an interesting statement as well. The banks have to offer us something other than just banking services, and I think that was the most amusing and pivotal moment I saw. We were prepared for an interesting relationship with our bank as interest rates diminished. All of a sudden, we sort of looked at this path in front of us that said, hey, maybe I might actually have to pay the bank to keep my money in the bank. And all of a sudden, the banks suddenly realized that they have to offer something other than just core banking services. And just ensuring my mobile phone against theft is not enough. So as Kieran said, this amazing group effort of all of these reasonably archaic technology systems sitting inside banks, trying to figure out how to make that agile and work within an ever-moving payment environment was, I think, one of the greatest things that I saw come out of lockdown. A bank now has to offer you something other than core banking services. And who'd have thought we would have seen such a motivator to get a stoic business, reasonably old-fashioned, to be so agile.
And we ran a roundtable the other week that was all about in-banking marketing. And so using the bank's data about our transactions to promote into our feed. And it's one of the few ways now that we can really approach new customers. So customers that are totally unknown to us, that haven't succumbed to our marketing or our affiliate networks or promotion, but now in their bank feed saying, look, we think you should have a look at this and here's an incentive. So fascinating. I'm just going to touch on broadband, because one of the things that we find is that we're zooming to and from everywhere. People are working at home, but also people want to consume entertainment and shop at home. This availability of robust broadband workable data is very important. So I think one of the next pushes in the UK to get us above this 94% of people online, what's the last 6%? The adoption and push of broadband capability, especially for the levelling up agenda, is going to be an interesting investment area to see. And I just thought I'd show very quickly that the most age groups in the UK have kind of been active and online for the last 5 years. But the real, good thing to see is the adoption in the slightly older age group, which we're all getting closer to now. And it's tempting to say it's all pandemic, but we had seen a rise bit by bit. And I think this is a case, not that older people are laggards who need to be prodded or cajoled into it, but simply that why would they put up with the pain and the suboptimal experience that is most online shopping experiences? Whereas what we're seeing now is that all of the categories they buy are coming online, the experience is becoming standardized and straightforward, and they're of course using devices for so many other parts of life. It isn't a case of one thing makes the driver, but rather that it's going step by step. And again, on the right-hand side, we can see this increase in purchase frequency. We're only now seeing a few cohorts that are only buying online occasionally. buy online is becoming the norm. And this is something that we'll expect to see continuing and just getting stronger and stronger.
Some interesting stats, sorry, in when you look at age as well, if you just take 35 as a break point, under 35s and their use of digital payments, such as, you know, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all those digital wallets is you know, key. My 13-year-old son got his first debit card last week, and it took him about a minute and a half to put it onto an Apple Pay and PayPal account.
No, exactly. I think, you know, you mentioned 35, and there's a lot of talk about the generations, Gen Z, millennials, etc. But for me, that 30, 35 age group, they're the last people who look at computers as technology. So when I was but a young lad and I was studying, you know, computer science GCSE, where we were talking about 1K memory addresses and, you know, how to draw a diagram of how a hard drive works. If you're up to 30, you might think that computers are things you buy, that you put in a, you know, a place of privilege with an antimacassar on, and you have to learn the operating system. Anyone under that age, they are invisible. They are just interfaces to be used, generally mobile phone. Nobody puts on their CV anymore that they are highly skilled in Microsoft Office. Technology has become invisible. And I think this is going to be, if you like, the watershed that we'll see aging. Pluses and minuses to it, of course, but fundamentally the expectations of that post-technology age are only now starting to become apparent in, you know, commercial terms.
And Ian, one of the things that we found most exciting about this kind of the age differences was organizations that were used to dealing with the younger generation suddenly had this huge marketplace open up to them. You know, the most profitable marketplace in the UK is the sort of the 38 to the 45-year-olds, and these were, they were sort of sitting on the seesaw of engagement with e-commerce businesses, but literally overnight. These e-commerce organizations had to totally change their angle of attack to suddenly having this huge population of digitally unsavvy individuals that had to embrace with you know, payment channels, new payment solutions, that had to use e-commerce. Now, whilst that was an amazing agile pivot for these organizations, think about the amount of net new e-customers that appeared in each one of their pipelines. It was a huge opportunity for growth.
Well, another opportunity is the vibrant and global nature of UK's e-commerce. So if you look at the largest 100 retailers in the UK, and by retailers, I mean retailers and brands selling direct to consumer, we can see that it's a very sophisticated, capable market, and the UK's top 100 kind of beats all of Europe's 100 put together and stands shoulder to shoulder with a global elite. What we see is that multi-category retailers are currently taking the consumer's attention, which shows they like to be able to go, browse, shop cross-category. And we see that the UK has got a very strong presence in its own market. If we compare this with some of the smaller markets across Europe, their top 20 retailers don't include a retailer from their own country because of this invasion of global digital capability. So in the UK, 51% of brands are UK, but 42% are USA as well. So again, you can see that English language, sophisticated, capable access there. And when we look at where these retailers are based, the top 100 performers are 66% based in the UK, 17 USA, and then a very interesting tie at 4% between Germany and China. So that's going to be an interesting one to see fighting out. And Les Français come in at 2%, with then other making up the rest of it. So we can see that the UK is very much at the center of a global market. And that's great in terms of opportunity.
That's,
Now,
just going back to my comment about optimization, it's about being global but acting local. So, how do I manage fraud? How do I offer payment methods? How do I do local acquiring? They're the sort of things that are really critical there.
yes, and also how do we know who they are? So, one of the benefits of being a global hub is that thanks to logistics capabilities, as well, of course, as tariff and established trading patterns, people can just nip into the UK, buy it, have it shipped next day, day after, most places around the world. And so again, from a consumer data perspective, understanding that the person shopping at 2 a.m. is either a night talk or someone in New York who's looking for next day delivery. What do the cutoffs mean? How do we talk to them, especially as follow-up? I think that's very important. Now, since we're on payment, Kieran, seems a good thing to ask you, which is, when we look across Europe or into other markets, there seems to be a lot of diverse, different local payment options. But the UK is very much your meat, potatoes, one green veg kind of, it's the cards we've grown up with, Visa, MasterCard, bit of direct debit. We're not really seeing, you and me chucking cryptocurrencies back to each other, or, real payment innovations and changes. Is that because what we've got is so good and just works, or we're a bit slow, or what? How come this doesn't look more differenter than it does? Is this local bias to me, or?
I think it's just brand reputation and confidence in a card. So Visa and MasterCard do a fantastic job of saying that if I am a victim of fraud, for example, I will be, I won't be, I can be reimbursed for that. The likes of cryptos is still a bit of a myth to most lay people. We have seen a huge, especially in fashion, move towards buy now, pay later, and it's increased basket sizes, and that will continue to grow and become more, there'll be more players in that space, I think.
Okay, interesting. Well, there's quite a lot of detail on that, which I will leave to people to read and enjoy. We've touched on logistics quite a lot. And, I must say that the logistics capabilities in the UK are amongst the best. And I say this as we are just across a patch of water from Europe, which again has a very sophisticated setup. We're now seeing that delivery times are becoming more and more accurate, and also that the promises retailers are making are definitely being played out. And we're seeing in the UK that around 57% of retailers are offering next day delivery, and 54% are offering click and collect now as an alternative. So I suppose our question really is, what happened to the other 40+%? Because this really is a norm. But we have seen over the last year a lot of innovation as well in terms of collect from doorstep. So what used to be a super premium service, we're now seeing for run of the mill. We're seeing the Hermes DPD pickup. We're seeing Royal Mail pickup. We're seeing Royal Mail introducing Sunday deliveries as well, with incredible amounts of tracking and customer information. So again, very capable, and 93% of parcels are being delivered on first attempt. Now, that's great. It has taken a pandemic to lock us all in our houses to make sure we can't miss a delivery. But look, I'm not going to be snide. That is an incredible upsurge. We have seen for the first time ever a slight downturn in the number of retailers offering next day delivery. And this has solely been due to supply chain issues and the fact that the parcels aren't necessarily there to be delivered next day, but phenomenal levels. And alongside that, a big increase in free returns and drop-off on post as well. So very vibrant, provides an excellent base for retail. And in terms of retail, we've also been seeing do some analysis on the categories that people are selling. And what we can see is that clothing has been dominated by the younger segments. But if you look at the chart on the top right hand, what we can see is that across all categories now, we are seeing a pretty representative age breakdown, which shows that there aren't any longer old people categories, young people categories. There's just online shopping, irrespective of age. Just want to drop a few points in on peak. So we did a lot of analysis on Black Friday and the run up to Christmas. The good news was that the spend on Black Friday was some 2.5 billion euros higher than last year. So that's good news. The interesting thing, though, was that the average spend declined. So that dropped down to about 223 euros spent online in that 5-week peak period versus 261 for 2019. Now, some of this is because products just ran out. So you just couldn't buy it whether you wanted or not. And secondly, as we've had so many more people buying, it's not just early adopting affluents in urban areas who've been splurging on nice presents for themselves and their loved ones. So I think I wouldn't read too much into that. I would definitely look at the increase overall. But what has been interesting is that younger people in that post-IT age, around 69% of them serviced all of their Christmas online. Now, I know there weren't the options this last year, but I think it's one of those things that, once you've done it, you're not going to go back to schlepping through stores other than for experience and pleasure. Now, all categories this Christmas had lower spend, apart from these three, where electronics and entertainment and alcohol all increase the spend. Look, you don't need a research PhD to know that that rings true. The biggest drop was clothing, which nearly halved. But again, who's changing clothes while we sit there on our games, entertaining ourselves while drunk? So we paint a picture there.
I think we saw that merchants also tried to start their peak earlier because of those logistics views that there weren't enough slots over that.
Yes,
smaller
and of course, people worried that when the stores are open in September, if I don't do Christmas now, we may be in a lockdown later. So absolutely, again, I don't want to extrapolate too much. I just think from this that once someone has changed their behavior, that will factor. It's a little bit like riding a bike in that, it's fall off, fall off, fall off. I don't get it. Oh, all of a sudden I can balance. Once you make that transformation, it's hard to go back. Another thing we had to cover off, we've mentioned COVID a few times. Bottom left, we did some research that asked retailers what they thought. And it was quite interesting how a few of them, nearly a fifth of them, thought this was going to be a positive impact. If you take the positive or no impact, around a quarter of retailers were just sailing straight on. Half of them thought it'd be a bit bad, but weren't worried. And a third thought it was going to have a major impact. So we're seeing this play through, I think, in what people have been saying to us. And the other disruption, of course, is the B word. I try not to mention it; it'll bring me out in hemorrhoids. But Brexit, right up until Christmas, no one knew what was happening. Might be, might be not. Will we get away with it? First 2 months, just administrative nightmare. And I think in a way it was lucky that e-commerce had been dampened down by lockdown because we managed to get through it. We've got VAT changes coming ahead this July, which doesn't matter who you ask, no one seems to fully understand or be ready for it. So lots of stuff there. I think the story we're getting, though, is yes, there are some horror stories. Yes, there are a couple who have sailed through unharmed. The bulk of people, though, it's a case of slow adaptation and recovery. So that's the quick run through. I'll take the slide down in a second, but I just want you to enjoy the lovely cover, memorize that URL where you can go and get it later. Don't worry, I will send it to you in a little while. And for now, for those of you who've been holding off on questions, I've got a couple coming through, which we'll take in a second. But I'm now going to stop my share so we can just see the lovely faces of the guests instead, and just get through some of your questions. So in our few remaining minutes, I've had one questiony type comment coming through about the split in clothing volume versus value. In that, Daniel Hoare, thank you for the question, has a suspicion that we're swapping high value suits and dresses for lower value casual athleisure wear. Daniel, I don't know what your kids are up to, but mine have an incredible ability to spend inordinate amounts on things that look the same to me, but apparently one is a super peng bit of athleisure and the other one isn't. So maybe young people can get back to us on that, but definitely we're seeing mix there and a lot of recovery at the moment in the athleisure place. Then Abelek has asked us a question. Kieran, this is just totally for you. It's two parts, I think. One is about how big is fraud in the UK. So that's the first part. And secondly, about safety on Apple Pay, Google Pay, when being used online. So do you want to take both of those, just a thumbnail of UK fraud, and secondly, Apple Pay, Google Pay?
Well, first, the fraud stats. I mean, fraud has grown over the years with 3DS 1, and hence the big move for 3DS 2.2 and strong customer authentication. But the reality is that, like I mentioned, the banks have actually probably absorbed the majority of that fraud because they're competing as well for top of wallet cards. So they want to offer frictionless, you don't have to enter a password when 3DS pops up. But they've had no data to kind of manage that fraud. All they see is a merchant name, ID, an amount, date, time. They don't see the credentials behind, which has caused fraud to go up. Merchants then see liability shift, so don't manage because they're not paying for the fraud. Consumers drop out because it's a horrible experience. So all those things are being rectified. And, although I didn't answer it with a definitive number, we expect the fraud rates to go down.
Yes. Also, again, we should be clear that fraud isn't an absolute thing. It's not like a lump of plutonium that has, a volume and a mass. Fraud is, to a large extent, a commercial choice. So depending on if my fraud increases by 1%, but my sales increase by 10%, by relaxing my criteria for accepting sales, then I've got an extra 9% top line. Maybe fraud is the cost of sales. So I think we need to, lean into the fact that, we could have zero fraud by selling nothing. So it always is a compromise as you go through. Kieran, just very quick comment on your love or otherwise for Apple Pay, and then I want to bring Lindsay in.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the question is around, is it secure? I mean, you go through forms of authentication when you log on to your Apple Pay. So that does make that a more secure, a secure form of payment. Yeah.
Okay. Lindsay, so you were just jumping in and I talked over you.
Just to kind of give some perspective around how organizations are dealing with fraudulent events. Remember, we work in an organization that helps businesses track all those individual consumer events, but For the first time in the 8 years that I've worked here, we actually had consumers come to us and ask us to help identify those events that they're paying for. You know, they're paying vendors like us to track events across their landscape, but there is now a significant enough quantity of fraudulent events taking place in e-commerce that they actually want us to be able to identify them, to intercept them at source and be able to take that off their ever-growing bills with places like AWS and GCP. So interesting that organizations like my own are now having to build identifiers into our technology so we can figure out, you know, what is really a real event of a consumer interacting with your brand, and what's a fraudulent event, and how do you differentiate the two and stop paying for one and not the other?
So not just financial, but in terms of resource, time, and so on. Very interesting. Now, Daniel's come back with another good question, which is, what do we think about the proposed online tax? So I'm going to give you a chance to think about that rather than throw you in. Meanwhile, I've had a great question from Pankaj Kumar about who are the top delivery companies. Now, of course, here at Internet Retailing, we love all delivery companies with unreserved lack of constraint. However, if you want to see who the top ones are, may I just point you at edelivery.net, which is our sister title that looks at the top providers in the sector. And again, such an interesting moment right now as we have the Uberification on the one hand, collaboration and open APIs on the other, greening and sustainability, increased transparency. What a time to be in delivery. So I'm just going to not take this now, Pankaj. I hope you'll excuse me. edelivery.net, along with our recent report on sustainability in the final mile. Right, this might even be an ending question, I don't know, so people better be quick if they want to ask something else. The online tax, levelling up the high street. What do we think about this? Good idea, bad idea? Lindsay, kick us off.
I mean, tax is, I mean, it feels like I'm about to leap into the fire of discourse. You know, tax, the online tax, there's no doubt about it that organizations have to be more fiscally responsible with the money they're making inside local communities. You know, it always perturbs me that some people work for an organization that isn't paying for the policeman at the end of their road. So, you know, that's an interesting socio-economic decision that we all have to make. But I do think there is a fiscal responsibility for some organizations to be taxed more appropriately on how they do business inside various different regions, as opposed to them shipping the responsibility for that tax to a more independent environment. And I'm sure all of this conversation will definitely come to the forefront, because let's be honest, what have we done in the pandemic but borrow trillions and trillions of pounds from some very indebted man or woman somewhere on the planet. So I'm pretty sure that I won't need to talk about this, because it's going to be on the public forum being discussed for many years to come, whether or not we're taxing income, whether we're taxing businesses. So I look forward to that discussion with much aplomb. But at the end of the day, there has to be some form of fiscal responsibility from organizations reaching into your country to your citizens' consumable cash.
Yes. Kieran, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I totally concur. I mean, taxes, who knows what the new taxes will be.
I think one of the challenges is that an online tax will penalize success. And so the responsibility of tax rests with Her Britannic Majesty's government. And they're the ones who have been slipping and sliding, giving people bungs. Oh, why don't you set up in this area or that area? You know, when it's steel, we understand incentives, because you can employ 10,000 people who will pay PAYE, NI, and have a job. When it's a digital business, there's nothing, there's no payroll tax, there's no employment. They're literally just taking the profits out. However, the answer to that is in global taxation. So, Lindsay, you run Europe. If you have, Gunther in Germany, Pierre in France, and Pedro in Spain, who ring you up and say, Lindsay, we love you. I'd like to be paid tax-free, please, because my mind is mentally in Monaco. You'd say, I'm sorry, Sonny Jim, you get taxed where you live, where you work. So the fact that we don't do that for corporations is government weakness, and they shouldn't now try and expect, Amazon or Apple to wake up one morning and think, I'd voluntarily like to give over 19% of my turnover to redecorate number 10 or number 11 Downing Street. So I think my own view on this is that taxation is a matter of government, and we need our governments to act in a fair, transparent way so that businesses can optimize against the fair rules that are fairly applied.
I think fairness is the perfect way to put it, Ian. It's irresponsible that, and because we're not talking about anything fairer than local businesses that are in Europe or in Britain who have that identity, who pay taxes, competing with gargantuan monolithic businesses. I mean, I saw the other day that Bezos is now worth $130 billion. I mean, I definitely don't have a room next door with $130 billion in it, rather sadly. But I think that fairer apportionment, competition cannot be through an open tax environment. And I think the great news about the post-pandemic is that conversation is definitely come to the forefront, as it always is when we talk about
excellent. And I think from our sector, as we have seen in the UK, just to go back to the research, as we see in the UK, we have a savvy, open society that is able and willing to transact online with the world's most sophisticated, capable, scalable retailers selling good things to good people. It's all positive. And so we just now need to find a way that doesn't pick a couple of scapegoats and vilify them while distracting us from the fact that, some fairness is needed across the sector. I think I don't want to misquote the father of capitalism, with Friedman, but it was envisaged that capitalism was a free market within bounds, and the bounds are there for the governments to do, not for individual corporations. Oh, goodness me! Could someone pass me another soapbox? I can't believe that people haven't yet started arguing or disagreeing. So I would love to hear from people on this. Is that nonsense? Do you think we should do more? Is there a campaign waiting? Should we be sitting on our heels? Drop me a note, ian@internetretailing.net. Love to get your thoughts, and perhaps this is a topic for another research report to see what take the temperature of the industry. Well, look, we have used up our time. So I think we'll draw it to a conclusion there, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your comments. Interesting, stimulating, as ever. I've had a couple more questions on Apple Pay and so on. So I'm going to take those offline and give them to Kieran, and he can get back to you. So anonymous attendee, I'm happy to mail you back directly if you want to mail me and tell me who you are, but the system isn't telling me. So that's all for today. Just as a reminder, you will get an automagic link with a link to the video and to the research. We've got a very busy couple of weeks coming up with webinars and so on. So do go and check out internetretailing.net/webinars to see what's on next. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you in the digital realm sooner rather than later. Lindsay, Kieran, gents, thank you both.